So we are screening 9 films here, and this is the oldest of them, in the sense the oldest feature film. So we are showing some short films and some television shows also upstairs. They are the older ones, but as far as feature films are concerned, and this is from 2001. Also, it is important because this was his first big international feature. And as we know, subsequently we've seen Life of Pi and Spider-Man and so many other films. But this is where it all started back in 2001. So Asif will tell us, and of course Sutapa will share with us the story of, he was 33, 34 that time, when I believe the kind of roles that he was hoping for or expecting were not really coming his way. And then The Warrior happened, and I guess that changed course of his cinema career. In a sense, your Hasil, Makbul, they all came later. That was 2003, 2005. This is 2001. So it's an interesting period in his career also. So Asif, I hope you can see us and hear us.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you very much for joining us. So Sutapa is also here. I hope you can see her as well.
Hi, Sutapa. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So Asif, you can tell us the story of how and why Irrfan Khan. I believe you met him in a hotel here and you sent a picture to Sutapa, and the picture was not so very nice, and then she said something like it's his favorite kurta or something to that effect. So please, if you could elaborate on how and why Irrfan Khan happened back then.
So I'm born in London. I live in London. My family are from India, from Gujarat, but I've lived all my life here. And I had previously made a student film in India. And then I had this idea to make a feature film, and I wanted it to be like a Western. I wanted to do a sort of genre film. And I wrote the film with very little dialogue. I wanted it to be very visual and very cinematic. And the idea of shooting in India sounded like a great way to kind of, in a way, do something totally different to what everybody was doing here in the UK. And to do a film with very little dialogue, I was totally relying on finding a brilliant actor. And in my mind, I was like looking for, I loved Sergio Leone films. So the idea of like a Clint Eastwood or looking for my Mifune, that was always my idea, was I want to find someone that I could just show in close up and also who would work kind of believably on an emotional level, but also be able to do the physical role of riding horses and being a believable warrior. And I looked at some actors here in the UK and I never met anyone that I believed. And then I came to Bombay and I was traveling around and we went to NSD and we went to various places. And I was lucky enough to meet Tigmanshu Dhulia. And he had done the casting for Miranir on a previous film. And Tishu straight away said, I think I know the guy. I think I know the guy. And he mentioned this guy, Irrfan, who I didn't know anything about, I'll be honest. And we were in a really cheap hotel in Juhu, like not the nice hotels. It was like a really basic, cheap one. And I can very clearly remember the first time Irrfan walked in the room. And my experience up until now, I'll be honest, with a lot of Indian actors was they had no interest in doing a foreign film. They had no interest in doing a film with a director from the UK. They were very used to making 4 or 5 films in Bombay all at the same time. And I wanted to shoot on location in Rajasthan. I wanted to take my actor to Himachal, and it was all going to be in one block, which was at the time in the late 1990s, 2000, unheard of. And so I needed someone who was going to turn down other work to do this film. Nobody wanted to do this film. Then I meet Irrfan. He walks in the room. He just had this amazing presence and look. And he got the script. He got the idea. He understood the references. He already had an interest in world cinema and he'd seen films from around the world. So immediately to me, this was someone that I thought I can relate to because he understood my references, because my references were not Indian movies in a way. I was wanting to do something that was not typically British because it wasn't in English and it had no British actors and it wasn't typically Indian at the time. So I needed somebody that would understand that collaboration, and Irrfan got it. And straight away, I was with a really good friend, Amit Kumar, who also worked with Irrfan later on The Bypass. And Amit and I both were like, this guy's special. He's got something. I'll be honest, my worry was, I think I would totally buy the emotional journey of the character, and this person's going to move you. It's like, will we ever believe that he's a tough warrior? At the time, Irrfan was not built, right? And he was like, whether or not we could toughen him up for the beginning of the film was my biggest worry. Everything else, I thought this guy's going to be amazing.
I just want to ask you one thing, Asif, because at that time, Irfan was doing television and he was not happy at all. Where, because in Indian television, it means more is less. So from there, doing your film where less is more, did you find it difficult to was it difficult for you to see or ever tell Irfan, can you do less?
No, never. The classic thing, Sutapa, was that luckily I had never seen any of that TV that Irrfan was being asked to do, right? I knew nothing. I'm totally ignorant. So that would have been a problem if someone had sent me like these TV shows where the camera was crash zooming into his eyes and the music was going, da, da, da. I'm like, what? No way. I didn't know anything. I just like meet people and what feeling do I get? And I got a great feeling. Only afterwards did I see anything. I'm like, thank God I didn't know anything. So for me, it was purely like, and Irrfan just like naturally was the guy. He just did it. He just knew. I cannot think of any moment where I was like, oh, bring it down a bit, Irrfan. For him, actually, sometimes I was watching it going, this is old school, right? We were shooting on film. We were on location. I had no video assist. There was no replays. There was nothing like that. So we'd look, literally, I'm sitting next to the camera when we're doing a shot. And sometimes it was so subtle what Irrfan was doing. I was like, I didn't see anything. And the cameraman would go, that was amazing. What are you talking about? And I go, okay, great. Because I was like, he was doing cinema acting. And I would say it was my first experience of working with a real top of the game cinema actor who would take one line in my script and elevate it. If my script said he takes this thing out of his pocket and he puts it down, and in my mind, someone takes it out of the pocket and they put it down, and Irrfan will take it. Like there's a moment when he's like giving up the sword, right? When he gives up his knife in the film that you've just watched, and Irrfan will take it, he will open it, he will look at it, he will remember something, who gave it to him, and he'll take a sentence in a script and turn it into a scene. And suddenly you're like, I know everything about this character and no one said a word. And that was what he would do always. And I can't pretend that I was like this great director that motivated him to do that. He just instinctively knew I can do something with this moment. And so it became a really great collaboration between our crew, which was British and French and German. We had this quite international crew and a lot of Indian crew, all working together, and a mixture of kind of, in a way, British, Indian and European kind of mentalities that came together on this film. And Irrfan was able to perfectly kind of navigate all of it and do this amazing performance as my lead actor, who was the experienced guy working with lots of non-professional actors. People like Nuru, who'd never been in a film, who was like from Salam Balak. He came from the school for kind of street kids. And there were loads of children and loads of people who've never acted, and a blind woman who's genuinely a blind woman. And Irrfan was able to be brilliant with them. And then also, when it was his moment, do what he had to do.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned about the scene where he gives up his knife. There was another similar scene which I thought was very interesting. And how did you collaborate on that one specifically, if I may ask, is when they kill his son. So,
I think that's the best sequence in a film for me. As a piece of filmmaking, that's probably one of the best bits that I'm, in a way, most proud of as a director, and how everything comes together. And what's really important and interesting to be able to say is that that scene of the young boy being shown a severed head and asked, "Is this your father?" is where the whole film came from. Because that was a line in a book of Japanese stories that I read with my co-writer. And it was a young samurai boy who's training to be a samurai is asked, "Is this your father?" And he lies and says, "Yes, it is." And we took that 2 lines in a book and we said, let's make a movie out of that. Why are they looking for the father? What did the father do? Why is the boy lying? What happens to the boy? What happens to the father? So that scene that you mentioned is the whole reason why the whole film happened. And again, it's amazing because Irrfan is not the killer. He's not in the middle of the scene. He's watching it from afar. He's hiding, but the emotion that he can bring. And for me, it's the perfect kind of meeting of, it's a big set piece. Remember, I was 27 at the time. So we've got a big location. We've got this fort. We've got hundreds of extras. 45 degrees in the desert in Rajasthan. We've got children. We've got lots of local villagers who've never been in a film or anything. And then you've got lots of complex kind of camera moves and emotions. It's all music. And we're relying on Irrfan watching and reacting. And emotionally, you feel this person who's being set up as a killer at a key moment doesn't act. You know, when American people sort of like read the script, they were like, well, isn't that when he would go and get revenge? And I'm like, no, that's not what this film is. You know, it's not about revenge. It's about someone who's trying to be non-violent and the challenges of that and how difficult it is. And so I think that sequence is really, it's the clip that I normally show people if I'm showing a section of the film. And Irrfan is not right in the middle of it. He hides, he comes through the crowd, he watches and then reacts. And then even his reaction is kind of lost in the crowd, but you still feel it because you know what he's doing. Even when you don't see him on screen, you know what Irrfan's doing.
I just have to ask one more thing to you. As if Irrfan always felt, and if he was here, he would have asked you this question, is that you have a strong, you said Western, but I think it's the most spiritual Western I've ever seen in my life. So he always felt that you have a strong connect, even in your other films. There is something very spiritual about it, about all your films. So what in this, when it is about, of course, this is much more spiritual, but the allegory, the magic elements, everything, how do you communicate it to an actor that it is about more than the scene, is what I'm trying to say, more than the written scene, yes.
Oh, it's a really good question. And honestly, I don't know if anyone's ever asked that, right? So where does that come from? Initially, that comes from, like, what are you interested in? And what are you interested in saying as a filmmaker and as a writer and as a director? And for me, it's always like, I come from a Muslim background. I'm not particularly religious, but I was brought up with religion. And I think the idea of having all of the elements that you have when you're making a film, right? You have the script, you have performance and music and cinematography and editing and sound. And one of the other elements is kind of like spiritual elements or magical realism or something that is otherworldly that can sit up here above it. And so I've always been interested in all of my short films, my student films, even Senna. I remember Irrfan liked Senna because it was about a character's spiritual journey and he was a racing driver. So for me, that idea of, what else is going on that kind of motivates us and drives us, I'm interested in. Why do we make the choices we make? Why do we do what we do? Is it just because that's what I wanted at that moment, or is there something else going on? I'm interested in that. And I'm interested in films having a deeper resonance and whatever they might be about. And in this case, it was really important to have, a lot of the ideas for The Warrior came from like biblical stories. The idea of carrying this woman across a river is a kind of classic Bible story, right? The idea of blood on your face and even, the idea of can you erase your history? What do you have to do in order to kind of get away from your past? Can you ever get away from your past? So all of these themes I'm kind of interested in. So a lot of it is in the script. A lot of it is like thought about for a long time and put on the page. And then you have to find a way to do it because it's non-verbal. So then you need to find a way to work with the actor and the camera and the music in order to have the audience that when there's a camera, you said less is more. That was really, really like the refrain on that film. Everything was like the number of times it'd be like too much, less. The camera, less. There's no reason for, even a cut in the edit suite. Why are we cutting here? I don't think we need to cut here. It was like quite an obsession with me at the time. And my motivation, I suppose, with films like Robert Bresson's films and filmmakers who often deal with kind of spiritual elements. I wouldn't say I was a massive fan of Dreyer at the time, but films that are dealing with like a spiritual element that is in there and how do you get that across emotionally? So it's really interesting. And I think that's where casting comes in because Irrfan has that in him always. And so it's a lot of it is like hard work, planning, script, directing, and then you need luck when you make films. You need luck to be in the right place at the right time to meet the actor that can personify all of this with a glance and with a gesture, who understands it, who's coming from their own experience. And when I think about it now, Irrfan and I didn't really know each other. You get to know each other after you've made a film and then you spend time and you talk. But at the time, I was so young and not knowing anything. And I remember thinking Irrfan was so much more worldly and so much older. And he wasn't actually. He was also at the beginning of his own kind of journey in a way. And we just kind of come together. And that is the magic of cinema, isn't it? A bunch of people from across the world come together with this common goal. Every day is like climbing a mountain, like the end of the film. Every shot is a bit like climbing a mountain. And then you get to the top of the mountain, there's just another mountain on the other side, and you've got to do it again and again. And it's a miracle that any film gets made. But if you're lucky and you have all of the ingredients and you get all of the pieces together, somehow something beautiful can come out of it and something spiritual can come out of it. And then also, I always wanted to make films that lasted, like the test of time. And so the idea that 20 years later, the Warriors finally, getting shown in India and an audience are watching it on a cinema screen and seeing how amazing Irrfan was and what he was doing is like, it's really, I know it's emotional for you. It's very emotional for me as well. I'm sorry I'm not there.
It's so emotional. And when you were saying 20 years down the lane, it's really like that, because when I saw in hospital in London, he had that look what he had in this film. So I was just looking at every expression and I just felt that at that point when an actor is doing television and he's not exposed doing or performing on that level, so when he's doing a film, but I can see in his eyes his son's death. I can see in his eyes the fatality of life, how unimportant life is eventually, about magic. And I saw that on the last days of his life in his eyes. So I think it's very, very incredible on your part to get that out of Irrfan at that point, when he was just beginning in terms of films,
Yeah. So I saw this film in London on a big screen. There was a screening here a week ago. So I watched it. I hadn't seen it projected with an audience for a long time. And, obviously for all of us, it has such a different meaning now that Irrfan's not here. And the ending of the film was really, really emotional. And there's just like little moments, like when he says goodbye to Noor's character in that like cafe by the stream, by the river, and he just does it again. That's another one where it's just like he looks, and there's a tiny little smile, and that's so Irrfan. And he's just thinking it all through. You don't need to know, but you know. And then he's just gone, and he leaves him because this is better for him. Yeah. And all the way through, he does these amazing moments. There's so many great. It's a great performance. He was amazing in the film. And, for the audience, this film was a complicated film because, for me, Harvey Weinstein from Miramax saw the film, loved it, and bought it for the whole world. And then said to me, unless I do a free picture deal with him to exclusively work for Harvey Weinstein and Miramax, he will never release the film. So I didn't do the deal, because I didn't want him to own me, right? This is 20 years ago. I've just made my first film. I spent years making it. So the film hardly got seen anywhere in the world. That's why it's so difficult to see in India. That's why it's so difficult to see in America or anywhere. It came out in the UK. It won the BAFTA for Best British Film. A film not in English with no British actors or American actors winning Best British Film is amazing because of Irrfan, And so that battle to get the film out is like being such a long kind of challenge. And so it's been difficult for people to see how amazing Irrfan is in the film because the politics of filmmaking stop the film being shown.
Yeah. I guess when it comes to Harvey Weinstein, whatever happens for good, especially in your case.
Well, I didn't trust him right from the beginning, right? I was like, he bought the film and he gave me all his bullshit, and I was like, I don't trust you. And he's like, we have to sign 3-picture deal exclusively, or else no one will see the film. I'm like, that's not going to make me do it. So I had to sacrifice the film in a way to have a career. That's part of the challenge.
I also read that it was shortlisted by UK as an entry for the Oscars, but they didn't find it British enough in terms of...
They disqualified it. That's a funny story, okay? So we win Best British Film eventually in the BAFTAs. It's shortlisted for the Oscars, and then the Oscars disqualify it because they say, well, how can a British film not be in English? The idea that other people speak other languages didn't exist at that point. They didn't know, we're Americans. Americans speak American. British people must speak English. And so they just couldn't contemplate that anyone could make a British film not in English. So they kicked us out. And then the following year, Michael Haneke had a film that Austrian director makes a film in France in French. And they're like, oh, this is a problem, isn't it? Maybe this rule is a bit stupid. So they changed the rule the following year. But we got disqualified. But I have to mention that the first time we showed the film in India, we came to Bombay. So were you there when we showed it in Bombay when we first
I
the
was
film
there.
out? Do you remember? We had the worst Q&A ever afterwards. Because everyone, what the hell is this? Why are you making this film? Why is this why are you not making it in English? What, you're not Indian. You shouldn't be making this film. There's no songs. They literally, every cliche came out and everyone kind of disowned the film. And it was at the same time, 1 minute we're getting disqualified for not being British enough there. And a lot of people in India were like, this is not an Indian film. What he did? And then when it won the BAFTA, when it started winning loads of awards, Indian film wins award. Indian film wins BAFTA. It was classic.
I think it's something to do with Irrfan, because in Lunchbox, that's what happened. That was not considered Indian enough film because it was funded by, so that's why it couldn't go to the Oscars. So, I guess.
So that's, interesting. We are people in between spaces, and we make films that are challenging because they're in between. And then that's exactly why we have to do what we do.
Yeah, and speaking of Oscars, recently they nominated a Japanese film made by a German director, Wim Wenders. Perfect Days is in Japanese with a Japanese actor, and that's been nominated for the best foreign film.
The Warrior changed the rules at the Oscars. I've met the people now subsequently. When I went there with Amy, no, it's true. I went there when I was there with Amy, and I met the people who were in charge of the committee. And it was 10, 12 years later, and they apologized. They're like, yeah, we had a bad rule. It was a mistake. Sorry.
Well, better late than never, as they say. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Asif, to start with, for joining us here. And I hope this Q&A was much better than the one that you had last time.
It was much better, higher standard, but off the scale. And and lots of questions that no one's ever asked. And Sutapa, it's really, really beautiful to be able to do this with you. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Asif. Thank you for joining.
So thank you very much, Asif. And thank you all of you for joining us for the screening. And of course, there's another screening coming up. There's a book reading coming up. There's much more. But once again, we'll say thank you to Asif. I guess it's almost lunchtime there. So, bon appetit.
I'm really late for work.
Oh, okay.
I totally forgot about time zones, It's been so long since I've been in India. I forgot you were 5 hours ahead and not 5 hours behind. Anyway, lucky it worked out.
Thank you very much once again. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you very much, everybody.